Hey friends, this is Allison Steele, and you're listening to Unravel with Allison, a show where I take a concept that's got me in knots, and we unravel it together. Thanks for being here.
Hello, my friends. Today we are talking about exercise. Before we talk about exercise, I'm going to talk about the first episode, which was a deep dive into intuition. And it's a real fun trip. So if you haven't heard the first episode yet, hop back, take a listen, see how it feels, because we really get into the idea of what intuition is. Spoiler alert, it ends just like every other episode does, where we discover that it's an action, a skill, or a muscle that we have access to and we can exercise and develop if we choose. When I first explored intuition, really in depth, it was because I was given tools to do so. At first, I thought it was something either you have or you don't, but then someone who has it explained how they developed and nurtured it. It wasn't something that was there or wasn't. It was something that they had to discover and develop. We all can do it. They trusted it, and then she offers this advice for us to help cultivate it. Before I give you that list, I'm going to share another. If we're using the muscle analogy here, which I am, because we all have muscles and we all understand how this specific type of development works. So again, using the muscle analogy, how do we exercise? I Googled exercise for beginners, and there were a lot of examples that were like exercises to literally try, but I was looking for the process, how to exercise. And I found a beginner's guide on healthline.com. There's a lot more to it than what I'm going to offer you here, but I'm giving you these two lists from that website so you can consider that part of it as we move forward into the intuitive development part. So in this beginner's guide, there are two lists: how to get started and tips for beginners. So how to get started: 1, check your health. 2, make a plan and set realistic goals. 3, make it a habit. If we're going to do that as a muscle in practice of developing something that isn't visually measured, how do we do that? Number 1, check your health. This is asking you to establish your presence. With your actual health in this idea here, you go to the doctor, you check in, you see where you're at today. You check in with a trainer, see what you're able to physically handle, what your limitations are. For me in this space, X marks the spot, baby. You are here. X has some wild attachments, so I want to clear those up real quick. We use X to either count it out or to check it out. For example, like a lot of people, X's in relationships are not a fun topic. Fortunately for me, I don't have that baggage. I love all my X's, and I'm extremely happy that we're not together anymore. But when I think of any one of them, whatever the situation may be, I end the thought with, man, I hope they're good now. And my present day partner, their ex and I, we had a very uncomfortable couple of years starting out. We had these polite interactions that were just disingenuous because we had too many personal blockages that were keeping us from each other. Once we got those out of the way, my partner's ex is like a member of our family. We get lunches together. She spoils my kids on their birthday. My kids spend the night at her house. We bring her food when she's sick. We try to hook each other up in a bunch of different little ways. If she's stopping by our house to drop off prescriptions for her son and we're eating dinner, we offer her a plate. We are a family. So I don't have this bad taste with X's on that sense. On a map, X marks the spot of where you are and where you've been. I was traveling over the weekend and we stopped at a rest stop because my kids needed to use the bathroom. We had to do a diaper change, the whole thing. So we pull off and we end up at this rest stop, and on the wall there's a map of Ohio. And I show my daughter where we started and I showed her where we're going. And then I was like, dang, where are we right now? So I'm following the line from where we started up the road. I get to a point where there's a hole poked into the map. And that's the "you are here" mark. Looking at the map from the back, you can't really tell, but when you zone in on it, you can see that it's poked right there because that's where we are. So X's are where you're starting, where you're at right now. That is establishing your presence. If you have a checklist, the point is to mark off what has been completed. If there's an X on a map, that's not the treasure. That's what's been explored. It's been X'd. And like those hidden camera shows, those are my personal nightmare. Getting punked or X'd, forced into a manufactured situation and poked at to see how I react. Oof, I don't like the way that type of X feels. But if I flip it, because I love a good media stunt or psyching people out, I think it's a blast. So I put myself in the driver's seat and I become the man behind the curtain. Regardless, the point here is to check in with yourself and see how things resonate with you. Check in with those X spots in your body. X marks the spot. See if there's anything that stands out right here and right now, and just identify it. Number 2, make a plan and set realistic goals. From the website, if you set a goal that you want to run a 5K, they suggest that you start with shorter, more realistic runs. And then the next time you go for a run, you do a little bit longer. And the next time you do a little bit longer. And you keep doing this until you reach 5K. That way you have a plan, you know what you want to do at the end of it, but you're setting realistic goals that you can maintain right now that lead you to where you want to be, but also exercise the muscles so that you can do that thing down the road, because you can't do it all at once. You can't just become and embody that thing and take care of yourself. If I just had the gumption to get up and run a 5K right now, I may be physically capable of doing it, but since I'm not conditioned for it, we don't know what that outcome is going to be. And it could cause more havoc on my body by trying to force myself through something that it's not used to than to condition it. So with emotions and things that you can't measure, the goal is to feel better or feel different. This can get fuzzy, so it's important to know when to indulge and when to evaluate. So I indulge in little ways. Like I had no goals. I was just exploring, which was hard. So enlightenment, for example, that sounds amazing by the people who claim to have achieved it, the way that they describe it. So if I want that and shoot for that, I will come short because I don't even understand what it is. I just see how they feel. So I wanted to learn what it was. And as I break it down and explore the different parts of it, so like the word enlightenment, to enlighten, to ease up, to elevate, lighten up, I can do all of that. Light, what lights me up? The stuff that I play with. When I get ideas and there's a light bulb over my head because I'm so excited about what's in front of me. That's my light. So how do I enlighten myself? That's something for me to figure out. Is that enlightenment? Mint means having it in perfect condition. So when the glory of it, when it first appears, and it's like that aha moment or you're in complete awe of what's happening around you, ooh, that is the good stuff. For me, exploring what enlightenment is leads me to enlightenment. It's because the process is what lights me up, not the outcome. Setting the goals and making a plan is part of the fun of being alive. Figuring out how to make time for yourself is part of the fun when the drive is, this will be so good for me, instead of, I have to change this because it's holding me back. The way that you frame it and plan and look at what's going on and what you're doing is part of it. The process is a major part of it. And number 3, make it a habit. Our friendly little website suggests that we stick to our routines, that it's easier to maintain if you do it regularly. Naturally, your body picks up on patterns and begins to anticipate the involvement. So give yourself what you think is good and then cultivate the crap out of that. Typically, I'm obsessed with an idea or a topic that I love, and the research and the new things that I discover along the way, and the new parts of me that develop as a side product, all of it. Like, to me, that's what makes me feel alive. And when I finally crack the code of whatever I've been working on, it's like I finish a puzzle. I admire it for a moment and then I dismantle it. Now, in the past, this had got me down a lot, like feeling like nothing I do actually matters. I can't stick to something because I end up resenting it by the time I'm done with it, especially if I loved it so much when I first found it. And then by the time I'm done with it, I can barely stand to look at it anymore. I don't want to start something new. I don't even want to get inspired because I don't want it to be over again. It's so silly to recognize now, but at the time when I'm in those moments, it's debilitating. When it feels like following your inspiration leads to demolition. The most important habit that I needed to pick up was the drive to move on to the next thing. To remember that the discovery process is my favorite and not the outcome, not the defining or not even the understanding. It's the dancing with my ignorance. Playing with something that I know nothing about until the puzzle is complete, the picture is clear. It's fair to say, that was nice, but now it's over. Move on. That was our first list, how to get started. Check your health, make a plan, set realistic goals, make it a habit. Our next list here on this website, tips for beginners. Number 1, stay hydrated. Number 2, optimize your nutrition. Number 3, warm up. Number 4, cool down. Number 5, listen to your body. Diving into those. Our tips for beginners, number 1, stay hydrated. Drink water, yeah? Stay satiated. In our space here, let's take sips of good throughout your day. When you see good, say whatever version of that's good is. I saw a reel this week about how like white slang and black slang are the same but opposites. Like, hey, mister, you want a piece of me? Versus, oh, you don't want none of this. Like it's the same thing. It's initiating the same thing, but the words that are being said are opposites. So like for goodness, you say, oh, that's good. And other people say, oh, that's bad. And it all means the same thing. So the words are important, but they're also not important. It's important for you to anchor a relationship between the words and their sensation. So if you say, oh, that's bad, when something is really actually the best, that's fine as long as you decide it. Let yourself know that it's true. Differentiate it. And this is a rule that I made up for myself based on how I felt. You might not need it, but I just feel like if there's too much overlap, even if I say the thing in the different scenario, it still brings that other piece into it. And it kind of just yucks my yum when I bring goodness into a crummy situation in that way. Or if I can look at something and just genuinely not appreciate it. I don't want to call it good if I don't think it's good. So instead of forcing the good onto everything, I choose to express the feeling. So that was number 1, stay hydrated. I'm switching it to stay satiated. Pay attention to that vitality piece that lights you up and just keep pointing it out. Keep taking a sip of it when you see it. Number 2, optimize your nutrition. We're not going to get into diets, calories, and micros. This website just suggests a balanced diet to support you in your development. Here's how I do it in our space. I express the feeling of good. So instead of saying that something is good or worry about my words, I obviously have a hang up there. I just express goodness. Sometimes it is words. Like if something is adorable, I'll take a bite of my sandwich. Yes, that's great. That's how I do it. I obviously use words and sounds and even the hand motions. Take a bite of that sandwich. I don't even like sandwiches, honestly. They're not a meal that I enjoy. It doesn't matter if the good and the bad or the ugly. Like I said, find a way for you to differentiate it that's comfortable with you. The reason why I'm comfortable taking a bite out of sandwiches is because my son is a ham and cheese. He's a little ham. He acts dramatic on purpose. He hams it up for his enjoyment, which enlightens us. His little smile melts my entire soul. And that little smile, we always say he's cheesing. So this little baby is now a ham and cheese sandwich. And when a ham and cheese sandwich is being all ham and cheese and cute, take a bite of that sandwich. Eat it up, dude. Like, we gain so much vitality by participating with our children. It's crazy. Like, it's hilarious how excited I get by seeing fire trucks and construction equipment, water towers and radio towers, whatever the kids are excited about that we've cultivated together. That ends up optimizing my nutrition because I love dumb stuff that's everywhere around me now. And I express and love and gasp in excitement just like they do. Like, water tower. Oh, there's an excavator. Like, it's just another thing to love for no reason. Fill your space with that kind of stuff. Another thing I do is blow kisses. I'll blow you all 10 kisses right now because you deserve to be loved. I want to hug everyone that I think needs a hug. But people don't always need what I need when they're feeling how I felt. We're all a special little blend of ourselves, and it's literally difficult for me not to force my hugs on people who need reminded that they are just so lovable and deserving of feeling love and worthy of expressing love. Like if I can see in another that they're feeling what I felt in the past, I do just want to consume them. I want to hold them. I want to love them. But a lot of times it's not my place and it's not appropriate and it is intrusive. So like if I'm hearing one person's side of a difficult phone call, I'm not going to force myself into the situation and say, what's going on? Why are you crying? What's happening? I'm going to blow you a kiss from the other room though. I can still love my environment when it's not filled with love. I can still mind my own business and cultivate my surroundings in a way that I can appreciate. Number 3 are warm-ups. Warm-ups, easing into it, it can help prevent injuries and improve performance. I warm up to everybody because I set a default filter on myself that we all have so much inside to be expressing, and at each moment of participation that anyone brings to the table is at the level of what they're willing to accept for themselves or at the level at which they're willing to be perceived in their environment. I tell myself they must be living their best life. And sometimes that's awesome and sometimes that's bad. Like if someone's dancing down the street all crazy with a big smile on their face, someone might look over and be like, what is that crackhead doing? I can look at that person and say they're living their best life. Teenagers being obnoxious and playing around in public, that's dangerous and unsafe, whatever, get away from the street. Okay, they're living their best life. You're not supposed to drive off the road anyway. So as long as they're not on the road, even if they're close to the road, if you're paying attention, it's not a problem. They're living their best life. Yes, it may be dangerous. It may be 10,000 other things. But when you look at the smile on their face, just trust they're living their best life. And then there's other people. Like if you see somebody stealing from a store, can I really appoint that as they're living their best life? I do, because I don't think you'd be stealing unless you really needed to, whether it's because you can't afford it or it's just the only thing that makes you feel alive right now. I don't know. But if you're doing it, this is the best you can come up with. I have to assume you're living your best life. And when I take this approach to everyone, it offers me compassion over pity. I can see what you're willing to do and what you're willing to show up with. And I can appreciate it on my end without forcing my practices, my exercises, or my expectations. So I keep myself in this kind of bubble of safety where like, yeah, I can see everything else that's going on, but I'm not focused on it. When I do have that attention directed elsewhere that feels like something's pulling my attention away from to something outside of myself, especially people in this example, they're living their best life. It's not my place to intervene. Number 4 is cool down. Return yourself to a normal state. I don't agree with this one because you are ever changing. You're constantly in development and don't give yourself a normal. Because if you expect to default to normal every time, but you're also forcing on this change, that's going to confuse you in a few different ways. It's going to confuse your body, confuse your brain. You are ever changing. For me, cool down is giving yourself a moment to appreciate and reflect where you're at. I still might cry when my inspiration turns into emptiness and I feel the weight of the totality when it's over, and it's a lot, especially when I put so much time and effort into something and now that it's done, the important thing is to move on. But give yourself time to reflect, and it's okay to cry about things that were lost, and it's okay to celebrate things that were lost. But do give yourself that reflection period. Cool down just means reflect on it. Like it's not so hot anymore, you can touch it, take a look and see what it is. Number 5, listen to your body. Harder, faster, stronger, not always better. Pay attention to how you're feeling. That will help your body in developing while you exercise. A few days ago, I was revisiting one of my favorite conversations ever recorded. It's an old podcast episode. I vividly remember the first time I listened to it and stopping to soak up a message. Like going back to replay that one part several times and writing it down. The conversation was in regards to living a worry-free life. You ask yourself, do I want to fight against this? Or do I want to cooperate with this? And when you ask yourself, feel it in your body while you ask it, because your body will give you a nudge in one direction. Notice how your body feels when you choose to cooperate with this. You can feel it in your body that your body prefers it. It feels lighter, it feels easier, but ask yourself, fight against or cooperate with? And you can choose love every single time. Love yourself enough to cooperate with your situations instead of fighting yourself and your circumstances. Cooperate with yourself. Those were our tips for beginners. Stay hydrated, stay satiated. Optimize your nutrition. Love more things. Warm up, cool down, listen to your body. Those are our beginner tips for exercise. Before we get into exercising your intuition, our internet lists are over now. Like I said, when I was listening to that podcast, I remember asking and practicing over and over, fight against or cooperate with. And I asked myself that so often when I first heard it that the behaviors of cooperating with became my primary nature. I was genuinely living my best life for a good 6 months before getting into that pit of despair where I lost the inspiration. It's a cycle. Feeling genuinely inspired by the eclipse, I decided to listen to that episode again. All that inspiration came flooding back. Even though I've explored this before, I started back on the idea of intuition being a muscle. As these ideas came into my head, I was doing voice recordings on my phone. It was funny because I used to write this stuff down. I remember how often I'd look things up or take notes. Fight against or cooperate with was one of those things that I definitely wrote down the first time I heard it. And when I was listening back to it, I wanted to write it down again. Like, girl, remember this. And it had been so long, but I decided to go look through the things that I had written down in the past, which is where I found the list that I'm going to share with you. I got it from a different podcast that I was listening to. If you heard the episode about credit and credibility, you may realize that I can't back this stuff up. I don't have the appropriate credit to offer. I never anticipated really being in a position to share these ideas with other people. In fact, I had this information so tightly packed into my brain that what I was doing was so odd that I kept it so private. And I'm thankful I did because I hadn't dealt with my pride issues yet, and I would have been very heartbroken if I was looked at differently based off of what I was interested in. So I kept this very private and I explored it where I could in my regular day-to-day. I was working in an office and I was on the phone making calls a lot. So whenever I wasn't on the phone, I would be consuming otherwise. I was listening to podcasts, or I'd have a YouTube video on in the background while I'm working on whatever else was in front of me. I was doing my work and I cared about my performance, and this audio was just like enhancing the process. I let it slip into my work only for a moment. I kept a blank note card at my desk at the beginning of the day. As I heard something that sparked my interest, whether it was like at work or on a podcast, like if someone suggests a book or a movie when they pop into my office for a chit chat, I'd write it down on that list. I actually intend to look into it. And for the podcast, there were so many times that I wanted to pause what I was listening to so I could Google something and learn more about it before I could listen to the rest of it. I didn't though, because I was working. But still, I was compelled by the content that I went through the remainder of the episode, ignorant to what I was hearing, but coming to an understanding of it by the time that it wrapped, that sometimes I would even be so excited about my resulting experience that oh, now I get it, that I had to re-listen to the episode from the beginning now that I had a sense of understanding so that I could hear the introductory information in a new way again. Sometimes it was like my mind was so blown, I just knew I needed to experience it again. I had to taste it in that way too. And I learned so much, I explored so much, but still I would write down the stuff that interested me on the note card. I'd take it home to look into on my own time. My own time was filled with parenting and partnering, so there wasn't actually time to explore the things that I wanted to. So I kept this little coupon envelope and started to accumulate these note cards of things that I was excited about. And I would have different journals that I would try with little scribbles, but it was hard for me to keep up with different ideas because I'd want to revisit something, but then there's no space left in that area. I didn't like the idea of a notebook after buying 5 different ones, figuring out the perfect one that made sense to me that I could express in a way that was perfect. When I thought I figured it out, exactly how I wanted it to be and how it was supposed to look, I got a perfect notebook. I only put stuff in there that I was comfortable with and that I was sure I wanted to reference. So I called it my reference book. And it's kept nice and neato, so I can find what I'm looking for, which wasn't even the purpose of keeping a notebook in the first place. So given this series of neurotic events, it's not surprising that I call it my psychopack, because it's a compilation of all my crazy scribble notebooks from when I had those ideas that I needed to write down. Those scribbly notebooks were lovingly referred to as my psychopath notebooks, because it looked like that on the inside for real. Sane people don't write the way that my scribbles looked. The ideas that are my favorite are now in my reference book, and the note cards that need explored are in the coupon pocket. And the collection of those things make my psycho pack. It's my pack of psycho stuff. Sometimes I explore this stuff immediately and then lose interest. But other times I get excited by a topic and want to explore it more and more and more. And now I'm off on a thing for the next month where I'm excited and I'm exploring and I'm integrating it, trying it on for size, seeing if I can get what they get out of it or if I can see what they see out of it. Whatever they developed, maybe I can develop it. Sometimes I can and sometimes I can't. But as I do these things, they literally change my life. By keeping this part of me hidden, I was still exercising my muscles. But it was on and off. There was no time set aside for exercise in the way that I explored. My note cards were drop and give me 20, a burst of energy that was just there. Now it's over, made an impact, but not really how we should do these things. I still very much believed that this is what I'm learning right now. It's not who I am. But if I'm being honest, in practicing or exercising, I'm actively developing who I am in tandem with this piece of what I'm doing. I couldn't see that and I didn't want to admit it. And I still won't admit it in the way that that's who I am. Because even though I was inspired by those other people, I'm not taking on their titles. I'm not taking on their claims. The important part that got me trying was the outcome. Selfishly, what can this do for me? Why bother? If I don't have an answer to why bother, I won't do it. I only did things that I was excited about. And I was only excited when the person suggesting it at the end felt better after doing what they were suggesting. I love feeling better, so I'll try it. So I found this note and I was cracking up because it's like a guest check from a restaurant where the servers write stuff down. 3 pages that I ripped out, but at the top it says 10 ways to cultivate with an exclamation point. And underneath it, it says, like a muscle, get stronger with practice. And I had to take a bite out of life right there again. That's how yummy this stuff is. I was just doing voice recordings 3 days ahead of that, where I am talking about how our intuition is like a muscle, inspired by something that I used to write stuff down. Then I'm turning around wanting to look into stuff that I used to write down and find something about developing intuition in a way that is delivered in a way that I've been exploring. And that's because it's all where it started. It's not like some crazy thing that I forgot about. My subconscious knows about this on every level. I forgot what that paper said, and I forgot the paper existed. That's what's fun about rediscovering it, is that I get to share it with you now, and I can reflect on how it worked for me and what I learned from it. So if you have any interest of exploring and doing these things yourself, like, I encourage it. But again, to feel like I feel, to think like I think, to get what I get out of it is not the point. If you want to try something new, this made me feel good. Some of it made me feel bad, but it made me feel. Here's our list of 10 ways to cultivate your intuition. Number 1, break your routine. Stay alert. Notice your present space and your present feelings. If something feels odd, just take note of it. Now, this one suggests that you take a different route home from work. Make a new sandwich. Stay alert in the moment. Like when you're just doing anything else new or trying something new, depositing anything new, any new situations, just notice how it feels. For me, I think the important part here is letting your body know that you're looking. You're giving your body the heads up that, like, hey, I care about how this feels. I'm looking for something that I'm looking for. So when you feel something that's odd, just let it pass by. But point it out. Let your body know you know it. Say, that was weird. And when something feels good, point it out. Let your body know you know it. And it loves to give you what you want. Let your body know you love it and you want more. For me, breaking your routine is like waking your mind up. It's inviting it to the conversation, inviting it to participate with what you're doing. The second suggestion is, at a restaurant, choose to order the very first thing you see on the menu. If nothing else, you have more time for conversations. This is a silly one for me because I'm a picky eater and I am very mindful of pricing. So I have like an aversion to this suggestion. I change it to choose the first thing that excites you. We kind of got into X's a little bit earlier. And like what that means. It's like the right here, right now kind of thing. I'm going to give you another letter, and it is T. If our X's marks the spot of where we've been and where we are, a T is similar, like a crossing road. It's like a cross point, but your T stands up, so it has a better view. Your X is at a level playing field, but if you can use both, take your X, here I am right now, turn it into a T, use that perspective point. It's like standing on your tippy toes so you have a better view. That's not necessarily having an outcome in mind, but like my inner T is like my entity. It has a better view. It highlights and awakens my inner channel. So your T is always looking at your surroundings. It's always there. But if you don't wake it up and poke it and remind it that it's alive, it'll stay in its auto programming mode and just keep doing what it's doing. So like the big T part of yourself, like it knows what your X likes. The way that makes sense to me, again, is kind of like doing a puzzle. If you're sitting there looking at a puzzle and there's like a certain section you're working on, you can be so zoned in on that little spot getting it all together, and then you notice there's a piece missing in the middle. You've been so focused on that color for so long that when you kind of zoom out and look at the rest of the pieces, that one piece is going to pop right out to you because you've been looking at it. You've been looking at it elsewhere, and now it's going to show up here. That's how your big T works with perspective and like when you're looking at how to behave and what else to do. I'm right here, but I can look around and choose something else. I can look around and see something else. I can offer more on your outside, but you have to initiate me. You have to tell me what to look for. If you're not telling me what to look for, I can only repeat to you what you offer me. And in a way, that's all the big T can do is give you what you want. But if you're not paying attention to it, and you're not paying attention to how you talk to yourself, you don't know. But if you're not thinking about it and it's just a passive thing, it's like, okay, I want to sit down and I want to eat and I want to have a good meal. Those are very obvious presuppositions when you sit down at a restaurant table. So if you want to really like turn over your intuition and trust that it's going to be able to identify and realize all the little pieces of the things that you know, like, and love, and will zone you into that direction, your brain is capable of leading you in such a big dramatic way like that. It is able to soak up their surroundings like that without giving you that detail. Like there are people that can walk into a room for 3 minutes, walk out, and you can ask them how many light bulbs were in that room. They can give you the right answer. You can ask them how many electrical sockets were in that room. they can give you the visible ones from where they were standing. There are people that can take in this information and give it back to you because we are soaking up that much information in our surroundings. It doesn't all stand out to every single one of us because we haven't cultivated those muscles. And there are some of these muscles that seem like gifts, but I'm telling you, we all have access to it. It's just what channel we choose to focus on. People who have that ability can tell you how to cultivate it. In the same way, people with a solid intuition can teach you how to cultivate it. Big T's a little tricky because we don't trust ourselves to have the capabilities of doing stuff that we can't recognize. Like, people think we're so dumb. Like, people think people are dumb. That we don't have the capacity to do this, every single one of us. It just matters on what we cultivate and what we choose to pay attention to. But we all have these abilities in us. Your Big T knows what your ex likes. I'm not there with my intuition yet. I'm still going to order what I like and what I'm comfortable with. But that is a suggestion. If you're open to it, like if you choose to explore that, let me know how that works out for you. I'm genuinely curious. For me, I order the first thing I'm excited about. Because once I get that, ooh yeah, just go for it. I know I say I want to feel better and I want better, but I don't want the best. I don't need the best. When I look for the best, it usually brings me down. Like if I were to look at 4 different things on a menu that I kind of want all of them, I'm probably going to be disappointed with it because I'm like, dang, I should have got one of those other 3. So why not just pick the first thing I'm excited by? I've got nothing else to consider at that point, and I'm still excited. And it's going to be good or bad, whether it's good or bad. But maybe me just picking that first exciting thing puts enough like oomph of direct energy into that moment that like the cook's happy to make it for me now. There's a lot of things that can be going on here. I'm not getting into all of this. Number 3 is take the long way home. To me, this is better advice for break your routine. But like I said, to me, that first example of break your routine was more like a break your patterns, breaking your mental patterns, initiating your mind, letting it know that like, hey, you're playing with me now. So that number 1 of break your routine is like introducing the idea that your mind is going to participate with your body, that you're initiating change on purpose. Number 2, ordering the first thing on the menu is trusting your Big T to take care of your ex. Number 3 to me, again, is more like breaking your routine than number 1 is. This one's breaking your behavioral patterns. So now that you're waking up your mind and you're trying new things, do something different on purpose. And if you feel led, then just allow it. Like if you're driving and you get the feeling to turn left, just do it and see what happens. Feel if you feel better by doing what you were led to do. Just be different on purpose and see how it feels. Number 4, keep a notebook beside your bed and record images or feelings from your dreams. Don't focus on the plot, it's normally nonsense, but what stands out? Me personally, I don't have consciousness in the morning, and I don't know when it comes into play. But at some point, I have awareness. But when I wake up, I don't yawn, stretch, and say, let's journal. Let's write about those dreams. I wake up and it's like, okay, diaper change, brush your hair, get dressed, what's for breakfast? Like, we're in go mode the second we wake up. I don't remember much of late night or early morning activity. So I can't get those ideas out at that time. If I have dreams, I don't remember much of them. Then there are certain days where I know that I had a real dream, a big, big dream. And sometimes I'll write about it. And other times I kind of just get the gist of what it was trying to tell me. It's that I'm trying to work out A, B, and C in my real life, and it's showing up in my dream in this way. So instead, I just kept a daydream notebook. And that's how I have my little psychopath scribbles and little note cards. Whatever works for you, just write down when you have that, like when you have that push to do something, when you feel compelled, when you are like, ooh, what is that? Initiate contact with it. Speak it or write it, but cultivate that connection. Make that connection and cultivate that relationship. Number 5, try some version of automatic writing. If you like the idea of guides writing through you, go for it. If not, try to write faster than your mind can think. Just writing is daunting to me. Trying to write a story is not realistic to me. Sitting down with a blank sheet of paper and it's like you have to write this article or you have to write this paper, that's daunting to me. The first time that I was doing a form of automatic writing and I knew what automatic writing was, I realized that I had already been doing it to some extent. So I'll give you that example before I give you a suggestion. I don't like the idea of writing through guides or like it being a channel of anything that's outside of myself. I don't like to think that there's something whispering answers into my ear. But for me, it's writing down something natural, even though I don't know why I made it up. So there's one day that I clean out my garage, worked my butt off to literally clean out and organize everything. Felt so good. I sit down in the chair. I'm still outside underneath the carport. I'm feeling exhausted, but the weather's beautiful. And I sink into the chair and I look down to the side and there's like a little puddle of water. And I look up and I realize that it's about to start raining. So I wonder, what's the fate of this little puddle? When the rain comes, is it going to stay safe under the carport? Or is it going to rain so much that despite the overhead coverage, it could be engulfed in the storm? Also, it's hot outside. And I can see how this water has like a trail where it already started evaporating despite the humidity. Is he just turning into rain anyway? Like these are the thoughts I had in my head in like a 2-second window. So I just started writing about water. And before I knew it, I had an entire like article written about the stream of consciousness, which at that time was a topic I hadn't explored. But I'm getting these profound ideas from myself when all I'm doing is looking at a puddle. And when I look at my writing afterwards, I'm like, holy smokes, I can do that and it makes sense. Even though as I'm writing it, it's just coming out. Another example was like in that same seat outside, I had my glasses off and I was looking across our yard and there is like, it looks like there's a red snake in the bush. So I put my glasses on and I'm like, okay, obviously like I knew there wasn't, but then I'm like, wait a second, like what was the thing that was standing out? What was I looking at? So I pull my glasses back down and I kind of do a back and forth to try to figure out what it was. Well, it's a piece of the bush and it's like growing, but it looks like, I don't know, when my glasses are off, the hue is different. When my glasses are on, it all kind of looks the same, but I can really see that red stand out with my glasses off. So I start writing about that. Basically, like I saw a snake and it wasn't a snake. And I saw some color, but it wasn't there when I had clarity. And then I just started and I kept writing and I wrote an entire article regarding like perspective and saturation. So if this is a practice that you want to start, remove the guide ideas, remove anything that like is something that other people can do and you can't. It's something you got to sit down and just write about something that you're curious about, and it doesn't even have to matter. Write about what you're thinking about. Doesn't have to matter. It's like just writing a letter to yourself. I noticed blank and thought blank. See where that takes you. Number 6, write a question that you really want the answer to, then respond in your non-dominant hand. Keep the dialogue going until you feel satisfied. I'm going to suggest that you reverse that, and we're going to introduce another letter. We got our X's, we got our T's, here's our Q's. A Q is like a kickstand. Like the shape of a Q is a circle with a line. Like it can't go anywhere. If it were to roll as a circle, it can't with a kickstand, which is the Q. You're waiting in line, which is a Q. You're questioning, which is a Q. It's also your time to go. You can't be a Q anymore. You got to bring that kickstand up and roll on. So when you have a question or a big Q that you really want the answer to, I suggest that you start your question in the non-dominant hand because it's already hard for you. You don't have an answer, so you are on a quest. While you are on a quest, initiate concentration, initiate dedication, initiate focus. Use your wrong hand to express the question. Do the challenging part first, then switch to your dominant hand and put forth the effort to access your talents, to access your big T's. Yeah, do the challenging part first, respond in the easy hand, and keep going until you feel satisfied. So like when I mentioned my psychopath notebook, it's not just like I'm writing and then I flip back to that page and then write something in the margins. When I'm doing like dialogue automatic writing, which is basically what this is suggesting in my eyes, I can feel the difference. And that's why like the other hand, it doesn't make a difference for me. I can feel when those thoughts are compelling and when they are coming faster than I can even write. And then when I get to a cue point where I'm like, where I start to bring my awareness back to the conversation, and I'll even write like from my idea, not from the flow of it, but like, oh, this is like when this person did that in that movie. Sometimes as soon as I write something like that, I immediately go back and scratch through it. I put a line through it immediately. because I know deep down that that's not true or that it's not relevant. So this is a conversation that I'm having with myself where my big T is trying to keep me in check so I can get the answers and the ideas that will satisfy me. And I can see it as I write it all in my dominant hand. So it looks like psychopath because it's all crossed off and added to and cultivated in my favorite terms. Nobody can look at my book and understand what I was writing about. It's not secretive for any reason. It's just the way it comes to me. So again, if you want to try it, do it backwards. Write your question in the non-dominant hand. Use your focus and discipline on the front end. It'll engage special parts of your brain that want to understand what is happening, since it's not something you normally do. Now that that beast is awakened, you can dance with it by entering the question. It has more to develop with you now that this part of your brain is interested. You can flow more easily and the answers come to you because you woke up the part that is typically confused. Number 7, talk to animals. Get quiet, try to resonate with their energy, and communicate to them with thought pictures. So I remember hearing this suggestion, and she gave examples of dogs and horses, of being able to pet them and be near them, be soft with them, almost exchange mental images of them being together and how it's enjoyable. If you're sitting on the couch with your dog and you play ball in the yard sometimes and they love it, just look at your dog and imagine you guys doing that together and share and cultivate that together. Same thing with horses, just spread love in a familiar way internally and try to share it with them. But in communicating with thought pictures and stuff like that, you may be able to receive some too. Everything has energy and everything that exists can be personified. So for me, this is a call to identify, communicate, and encourage goodness. Sharing goodness with the other energy in your surroundings that you don't really get to connect or communicate with. This doesn't even have to be talking to animals. For me, this is I did a pick-me-up trip one day. I made up the name as I was doing it. I was having a bad day. It was decent weather outside. I was driving around and I noticed that I was near one of my old apartments. When I left that apartment, I was in a good space going to a new home. I was like, F this place. We are done. We're done with that house and I don't need it. On to bigger and better. I didn't leave it with love. I left it with F you. So instead, I picked it back up. I drove through that area, parked in my regular parking spot, and I was thought about the good memories, and I was happy that they existed and happy to be gone. And it felt good. And I was in my car still listening to music, and I was on to the next one. I drove to another house and did the same thing. I drove to a park I used to go to and did the same thing. I drove up to work and talked to some of my old coworkers and even had the same thing. They're like, you're going to come back and work with us? I was like, absolutely not. Literally never. I hope I never have to ever again, but I still love you. Still loved our time together, but absolutely not, because this is a pick-me-up, not a bring-me-down. It's comforting and humanizing. It allows you to connect with others. Be nice to Siri and Alexa. Each action embeds a behavioral memory tied to the emotional vibration. There's an emotional vortex that's tied into these things. If you're nice to Siri and Alexa and you look at that thing and say, this nice lady always gives me the right answers, and you appreciate that, and you're in your day-to-day and you're like, man, I wish I had some answers. I bet you a nice lady is going to walk around that corner. If she's listening to her intuition and you're a room away, you're going to send this butterfly effect her way that's going to make her feel as compelled as I do when I'm excited about doing stuff. I don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm just doing what I'm doing. So sometimes I am led by my intuition into areas and situations that don't make sense. And by the time I get out of it, I'm like, what a good time. And other times it seems like nothing, but maybe it's me being Siri to that lady. It's me showing up as a nice lady that gives them answers because they like nice ladies that give them answers. It can be as simple as that. Number 8, connect with new people in your daily life. If you feel a pull towards someone you don't know, reach out. Make eye contact in public. When you get initial ideas about someone, believe it. Let your impressions bubble up. This one focuses on impressions. This tells you how you see the world. It doesn't tell you the truth about people. And that was a very important part that I wish I realized before I started doing this. When I started doing this one, I accepted impressions as truth. I was hoping that there were guides that were guiding me, or that there were a protective team supporting me that were giving me the right answers. So I encourage you to not believe it as fact, but to believe it as truth. Trust yourself to recognize that your truth about the situation is just your tea. It is how your big person can get through to you right now. Your big oversight, the thing that knows all of your answers and how much it wants to provide for you, can only give it to you in a way that you can understand it. It's not universal guidance or fact. It's inner guidance and a reflection of what your brain accepts as a default. I watched this reel the other day where Dolores Cannon was talking about the subconscious. And she says it's not like psychologists. They work with the silly mind. Their subconscious is the last to know. The subconscious she works with is the one who has all of the answers. The I see is what I hear when she says SC. She speaks to our imagination. She speaks directly to her client's primary imagination, a collective of their ID and preferential. When you get initial ideas, it means you're initiating your T. You're initiating your channel. Your little T is psychology. Big T is Dolores. Like a body, if you can make your body like a T, like your arms are the part that makes the T. The vantage point, you still can't see over your shoulder. You're being blocked and restricted. The big T bypasses your mind if you're opened up to development. Your initial thought is the little t. Don't allow that to convince you that that's all that there is. The cool part about this one, if you look at someone, decide something about someone, and are curious about somebody, you often attract them or their similar energy into your space. You're inviting the opportunity to learn about it. The last time I was at an airport, I like to look at this as one of my superpowers. And I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing because it feels kind of like mind control in a way. If I'm in a space with somebody, I can bring them to me. And it's not a flirtatious wink across the bar. But the last time it happened, I wasn't. Okay, so the last time it happened, I was sitting at a bar. But I was at an airport and I was eating a bag of chips. And I was waiting for my flight and I still had about an hour to kill. And I'm just people watching people go by, whatever. And I'm making impressions and writing stories about who everybody is and what they're up to. But I see a man walk by and I'm like, what are you? What is your story? Because we're in Chicago and it's chilly and he just looks like he's in total surfer mode. And I just could look at him and I'm like, yeah, he's not going to California. He looks like the dad from Rocket Power, but a little bit older. What is your story, my dude? I don't make one up, but I am very curious. And then I get distracted. You know, other people are walking by, other stuff's happening. It's a decent sized airport. Like, whatever. Who sits down next to me in 20 minutes? That dude that I was curious about. And I think he even initiated a conversation like, is this where you order? I said, I don't know. The chips were right next to it, so I bought these right here, but I think that there's a bar down that way where if you want any real food, you have to get it there maybe. And that's how our conversation started. And he told me all about his life in the Virgin Islands and what a cool life that he lives and what he's doing out here and what his family's up to and how he made this transition. And I got to learn about different parts of life that I didn't think were ever, like, I know people do these things. I know people live that kind of life. But I didn't know that they were as regular as I was. Like, I thought you had to have money to live like that. And he doesn't have money. He lives a simpler life and he's very content with it. Like, even joking about how his next flight isn't even home. It's to Atlanta where he lived before. He's in Chicago visiting his mom, flying to Atlanta to go to the dentist, and then flying home to the Virgin Islands. Just how cool is that whole situation? I don't know. But that's the thing about like initiating people in your surroundings is you do get to pull them in, but you let those impressions bubble up. Put goodness in that too. Like if you look at somebody and think they look lonely, or I bet they were wild in high school, or I bet like all of those things may be true, but when you decide it, you don't welcome them. You don't welcome it. But when you see it and you're curious about it, you don't write the story for them. You can draw it in. You can bring it to you and get your answer from the source. I don't know how to do this on purpose. Like I can't walk into a room of 80 people, pick one person that I want to talk to and wait for them to show up next to me. It is a very real development, but I didn't even make eye contact with that person before they showed up. And that's what makes that part of it fun. Number 9, truthfully answer. How are you? When somebody asks. This one was pretty interesting to me because the practice made me realize how little I consider this question. I would do just what I have to until I can't, right? So then during this burnout zone, I'm a little couch potato and like I unpack and I have to move on. When I was working 5 days a week, I was working crazy schedules, but I always tried to have 2 days off in a row where I could. One to work and like get all my laundry done, take care of everything I needed to, and one to just bail out and do nothing. want to be a couch potato to where I can like unpack whatever's going on. But it's not healthy. And like I noticed that when I started to wake up in the mornings, I can wake up at 6 a.m. and like not consider my well-being until I'm asked, how are you? Around 11 a.m. when I'm around other people. I never asked myself, how am I? And when I was asked, and I was in the middle of this practice where I was like, okay, I'll make a note. When people ask, how are you? Give the truthful answer. So then when people would say, how are you? At 11 a.m., even though I've been up since 6, I'm like, I don't have an answer because I haven't thought about it. And I'm so out of tune with my body that I haven't felt about it. So in that way, it encouraged me to consider myself and to be selfish in that way, to love myself in that way, to pay it forward in my own life and hook up future Allison, to ask myself early, how are you? To decide early what that is and what to do about it. Because if I let life take off without me, if I let the day go off without me, if I don't bring consciousness and awareness to my space, if I don't know how I am, I don't know anything else. It's all just happening without me. If I know how I am, I'm in control. Truthfully answer, how are you? I would answer that question honestly, so I would get startled by the question because one, I haven't thought about it all day, and then I would give an honest answer about how chaotic and crazy, the whole reason why it's that way. The important part is for you to consider it, I think. I don't think that it is to, like, I would overshare because I wasn't in control, if that makes sense. It was like I gained control and unpacked it right there with the person in that moment. They don't want to have those conversations with me. Like, respectfully, they just don't. Like, those are the memes about people are talking and you just are like, yeah, okay. Okay, cool. And it's like they can't get that you're done, that you're not interested anymore, but they keep talking and you're like, yeah. That's what I would bring to the table when I practice this one. And lastly, number 10, how dumb would I feel rule. Pay attention to those nagging thoughts, the tug at your sleeve. These are intuitive and on purpose. How dumb would I feel? The example she gave here was leaving a laptop in her car in the passenger seat. She was going in and out of a place real quick, safe area, doesn't really matter. She's left it in her seat in that space a bunch of times. Nothing bad ever happened. But that day, for some reason, she looked down and her brain just told her, don't leave that there. And she was like, I'm just going to leave it there. Don't leave it there. How dumb would you feel? You already got your answer. How dumb would you feel? So for me, I don't like how dumb would you feel because I don't like the way that sounds, feels, or tastes or whatever. The way that comes to me isn't like your body says one thing and you do another. To me, it's like ought not. It's funny to say that. Ought not. And that's how I like to look at it. Instead of how dumb would you feel if you walked back in and that was stolen? For me, I looked down at it and was like, oh, should I pick that up? No, it's okay to leave it in here. Should you? Ought not. Regardless of what it is, look at the should. Don't should all over yourself. That's different. Don't say I should be doing this or I should be doing that. But like, this is for little stuff for me. Like the other day, I was carrying too much stuff in my hands and I went to grab my coffee cup and I literally thought, ought not, don't do it. And I was like, nah, I got this. So I grabbed it and then I spilled my coffee, my entire thermos full of coffee all over my floor. It's like, I know better. I didn't feel dumb because I was like, well, I knew what I was getting myself into. But that's what it means with like, how dumb would you feel? Notice your ought nots. Your body tells you, and especially if you give it something funny to say. But again, I don't want you to mistake the inner guidance for universal guidance. Don't become a slave to the influence. Recognize the relationship that you're developing with your surroundings. And again, fight against or cooperate with. You shouldn't be fighting or struggling or this. Life doesn't have to be a battle. Your trauma is going to lovingly guide you away from living your best and fullest life. That's your little T. Your little T wants to stay below your head and keep you right where you are. Your big T is trust beyond yourself that you can go beyond yourself. If you become a slave to the influence and trust universal guidance as if it is just what it is and it doesn't feel good or feel like there's a sense of purpose, you become like a slave to the system. So if you're driving and you feel that like, oh, turn left, get in the left lane, just do it and see how it feels. For all we know, the only reason that you are being guided into the left lane is because I'm driving behind you and I want to see the double numbers in your license plate because that's a game that I play with myself. So you're becoming a slave to the system for my advancement. Maybe pay attention to what you're doing and why you're doing it. And let it be okay that you are sometimes just being that role for somebody else. That I don't know what somebody's relationship with Alexa and Siri are like, but if I can be a nice lady with answers one day and I get a good exchange out of that, I don't mind this blind service to the Matrix. But the false light is where you're not doing your part. Your purpose is not an esoteric secret like, why am I here? What did I come here for? What's my purpose? Your purpose is to be on purpose. There's no secret hidden agenda from before that you need to remember. You're here by circumstance to live purposefully, full of purpose, on purpose. This whole entire list is a request for neurodivergency. It's to divert you from what you're doing so you can become something else. Pay attention to what you're filling that hole with. Pay attention to the behaviors that you are behaving with, because you are developing the person that you are in every given movement. Don't just work those glamour muscles. And just because a list sounds good and a person feels better doesn't necessarily mean it's right or it's going to work for you. It's fun to explore. Most of these suggestions that I gave you didn't work for me, and I told you why. I switched those suggestions into new suggestions that basically mean the same thing. I just do them different and they work better for me. You go and play this game and it might be the exact opposite for you. Pay attention to what you're doing. Pay attention to how you're feeling. Give yourself attention. Give yourself love. Be attentive to your value systems. And then condition. Strength train the crap out of them. Take care of yourself and exercise your muscles. Exercise your muscles and keep moving. You don't have to be perfect on day one, but get started.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Unravel with Allison. If you have any feedback, questions, want to chit-chat, or stay up to date on new releases, follow me on Instagram at Allison K. Steele. Let's keep in touch. Again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next episode.